She stood outside the building she once owned, her reflection barely visible in the glass doors that no longer opened for her. 9 years of 16-hour days, of missed birthdays and unanswered calls, of choosing boardrooms over family, all of it gone in 72 hours. The security guard inside wouldn't let her pass, and she realized with a strange clarity that she didn't even know his name, though she'd walked past him every morning for 3 years since the company moved to the biggest building in the city. Her phone kept buzzing with calls from lawyers, investors, journalists, everyone except the one person whose call she was waiting for, her 19-year-old sister, who'd sent a single text the night before. "You always said family came first, but you were never there when I needed you." At 35, standing in a designer coat that now felt worthless with frozen fingers, she understood something she'd spent a decade running from. You can lose everything you built and still not hit bottom. Because the real fall happens when the people you love stop waiting for you to show up. The morning air cut through Rachel Morrison's coat as she stood on the corner of 5th and Madison, staring up at the steel and glass tower that used to bear her name. Carson T.S. had been her baby, her obsession, her entire identity since she was 26 years old. She'd built it from nothing, from a cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, where she'd coasted through the night, fueled by instant coffee and the desperate need to prove she could make it. By 32, she'd been on the cover of Forbes. By 34, she was running a company worth $200 million. By 35, she had nothing. The board meeting had lasted 47 minutes. Her business partner, the man she'd trusted since college, had presented fabricated evidence of financial fraud, invoices she'd never seen, transactions she'd never approved, emails with her signature that she'd never written. The vote was 7-2. Security had escorted her out while her assistant packed her personal items into a cardboard box. That was 3 days ago, and she still couldn't quite believe it was real. She kept expecting to wake up in her penthouse apartment overlooking the Hudson to realize it had all been some stress-induced nightmare. But the penthouse was gone, too. The bank had frozen her accounts within hours. Everything she owned was tied up in legal proceedings that her lawyer said could take years to resolve. Now she was staying in her college roommate's studio in Brooklyn, the same neighborhood where she'd started, sleeping on a pull-out couch that smelled faintly of cat litter. Her phone rang constantly, but never with the voice she wanted to hear. Her sister Sophie hadn't answered a single call. That text message last night was the first communication they'd had in 3 months, and it had landed like a punch to the gut. Rachel had always told herself she was working for her family, that the long hours and missed moments were investments in their future. But standing here in the cold, watching strangers walk in and out of her building without a second glance, she realized she'd been lying to herself all along. She'd missed Sophie's high school graduation because of a meeting in Tokyo, missed her first day of college because of a product launch, missed the grandmother's funeral last year because she was in London closing a deal. Every time Sophie had said she understood. Every time Rachel had believed her. But understanding wasn't the same as forgiving. And forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. The distance between them had grown so gradually that Rachel hadn't noticed until it was too late. Until she was standing alone on a street corner with nothing but a borrowed coat and a phone full of calls from people who wanted something from her. Never for her. The doors of the building opened and a man in a Navy security uniform stepped out carrying a cardboard box. He was in his early 40s with graying hair at his temples and the kind of steady, unhurried movements that suggested he'd learned patience the hard way. Rachel recognized him vaguely, the same way you recognize someone you've seen 1,000 times without ever really looking at. He set the box down and pulled out a thermos, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Steam rose in the cold air between them. She found herself walking toward him before she'd made the conscious decision to move. He looked up as she approached and something in his expression shifted. Not recognition exactly, but awareness. He knew who she was or who she used to be. Everyone in the building knew. The story had been on every tech blog and business news site for 3 days straight. Former CEO accused of embezzlement. Former Wunderkind facing criminal charges. Former everything. I need to get inside, Rachel said, and hated how her voice cracked on the last word. Just for 5 minutes. There's a laptop in my old office with photos on it. Personal photos. They're not backed up anywhere else. It was a lie, but a small one. The laptop existed, and there were photos. But that wasn't really why. She wanted in. She wanted to walk those halls one more time. To sit in her office and remember what it felt like to be someone who mattered. The security guard looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head slowly. I can't do that, ma'am. I've got direct orders from management. You're not allowed on the property. His voice was kind, which somehow made it worse. She would have preferred anger, coldness, anything but the gentle sympathy that made her feel like a charity case. Do you know who I am? The words came out sharper than she'd intended, and she watched him wse slightly. I built this company. That building exists because of me. And now you're telling me I can't even walk through the door. I know who you are, he said quietly. And I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't lose this job. I've got a son to take care of. He paused, seeming to consider something. Look, I can go up and get the laptop for you. What office was it in? I can bring it down. The offer was so unexpected, so simply kind that Rachel felt something crack inside her chest. She opened her mouth to answer and instead found herself starting to cry. Not the elegant single-tear kind of crying she'd done in her therapist's office, or the angry, frustrated crying she'd done into her pillow last night. This was the ugly, gasping kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and broken. The kind that once started, she couldn't seem to stop. She sank down, onto the concrete steps, not caring that they were cold and dirty, not caring that people walking past were staring. The security guard stood there awkwardly for a moment, then sat down beside her. He didn't say anything, didn't try to comfort her or tell her it would be okay. He just sat there, a quiet presence, and somehow that was exactly what she needed. After a long moment, he pulled a packet of tissues from his pocket and held it out to her. She took one, wiped her face, and tried to pull herself together. I'm sorry, she managed finally. I don't usually fall apart on strangers. You're not falling apart, he said. You're just having a really bad week. There was something in his tone. A dry humor that made her let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Cooper. He held out his hand, formal and slightly absurd given the circumstances. And she shook it. Rachel Morrison. But I guess you already knew that. Yeah. He poured coffee from his thermos into the plastic cap and handed it to her. Drink this. It's not great coffee, but it's hot. She took it, wrapped her cold fingers around it, and felt the warmth seep through. They sat in silence for a while, watching the city move around them. Finally, Daniel spoke again. You know, about 6 years ago, I was sitting in a hospital chapel trying to figure out how to tell my 7-year-old son that his mother wasn't coming home. My wife had cancer. We'd known for a year, but somehow I'd convinced myself we'd beat it. When the doctor came out and told me she was gone, I felt like someone had reached inside my chest and pulled out my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but sit there and wonder how the hell I was supposed to keep going. Rachel looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. There was a steadiness in his eyes, a quiet strength that came from surviving something terrible and learning to live with the scars. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. Thank you. He took a sip from his thermos. The point is, I thought losing her was the worst thing that could happen to me. And it was terrible, don't get me wrong. But the real bottom came about 6 months later when I realized I'd lost myself, too. I'd been working at a financial firm, pulling 70-hour weeks, traveling constantly. I'd told myself I was building a future for my family, giving them the life they deserved. But what they